The mid-November winds howled ominously outside the tiny apartment window as Jess slumped back onto her couch, remote control in hand. She had planned to spend the evening indulging in a horror movie marathon, just her and her favorite flicks. It was a ritual that provided balance for the chaos of her day-to-day life as a struggling student, a mild escape into the vibrating worlds of the worst nightmares imaginable. As the opening credits rolled for Slashers of the Wasteland, Jess prepared her customary bowl of popcorn, glancing surreptitiously at the flickering screen. The lively banter on-screen pitched and swirled, punctuated by glimmers of violence and absurdity that made the moments of horror all the more palpable. This movie was a parody, she reminded herself. The monsters and villains woven together by craft and created to scare or laugh, but never to touch her. She settled into the sofa with a sigh, naively believing that she was safe behind the barrier of her own reality. One by one, the movies rolled by. The inept teenagers, the masked killers, the supernatural entities, until Jess lost track of time. By the time the clock struck midnight, she squeezed the last few kernels from her bowl, her eyes bleary from the constant strobe of the TV. She was exhilarated and tinged with dread, the echoes of madness leaping from one screen to the next, heights of terror brought to her own world. Suddenly, the television flickered, the image distorting as if some unseen force were wrestling for control. The images wobbled and narrowed until a deep resonation rattled her bones. The familiar opening of The Unforgiven emerged, cold shadows creeping across the room as a figure stepped through her screen. Jess's heart raced as she staggered back. The screen pulsed, and from the pixelated void, a tall, cloaked figure emerged. A form cloaked in darkness and malice, reminiscent of the horrifying villains that had once only graced her screen. The air chilled, sending a surge of panic coursing through her. The figure seemed impossibly real, its hollow breath resting heavily within the confines of her room. Jess. Its voice rippled like rough fabric across her senses. "Welcome, designated viewer. Our time has arrived." Quote, "No way," she stammered, looking back at the television, which now spewed an eerie light that painted her walls. "This isn't real." Suddenly, the room shuddered as other characters began to seep from the screen, multiplying like a grotesque and twisted symphony. A roguish, bloodied teen wielding an axe, a snarling cretin with chains and a manic desire to chase ancient spirits with hollow eyes that bore into her soul. They filled the room with chaos, laughter, and howls. "No, you can't be real," she screamed, stumbling backward until her back hit the wall. "Of course we are," the cloaked figure hissed, taking a step closer, its face obscured beneath a thick cowl. "You've welcomed us into your world. We thrive on your fears." The room pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost alive, as if the boundaries between her reality and the horror on screen were dissolving. Desperate, Jess lunged for the remote, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the buttons, looking for an escape. The screen bounced erratically as she pointed it with fierce determination. Go back," she pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pressed every button. The screen flickered, the figures in her room momentarily retreating, writhing like shadows caught in the sunlight. She stumbled back into her space, thoughts racing. Maybe if she turned it off, maybe if they fell back as simple celluloid once more, her tormentors would dissolve. Just as her thumb pressed off, the cloaked figure screamed, "You are not in control. We were crafted from the bones of your fears. We are what you made us." Light exploded from the screen before she could react, swallowing her whole. When darkness began to lift, Jess was back on her couch. The television buzzed softly, flickering as if to signal she had returned. She breathed heavily, feeling misty and surreal as she sat there in the dim light of reality. Perhaps she had merely dozed off. But then she heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps behind her. In the corner of her eye, the bloodied teenager spun around, brandishing his axe in contempt. And the shadows swelled, consuming her world once more, laughter echoing louder than the wind outside. As the room buzzed with malevolence, she realized with dread that escape was no longer an option. The movie characters were real, they had crossed over. And now, they were hungry.